do and I don't, because I think people... I have friends that were raised that way, and I see them as they get older, they're slipping more and more into religion. Because to them it's this passive, necessary, I would say necessary evil for them in their life, you know, especially when you start having kids. All of a sudden you don't care about your own soul, you're worried about these little babies.
Do you have children?
Two boys, yeah, who fortunately are probably, or were probably too young at the time. Let me rephrase that. They were too young then. I don't think they really remember a lot of the church. For example, we ran into some people the other day and they didn't even know who they were. These were people that they saw.
I actually never figured out, or never bothered, probably more likely, how to teach religion to non-religious children.
Why would you want to?
Actually, I never did. And then we had an incident.
I think it's child abuse.
We had an incident when one of my daughters was in 7th grade, and she was sent home with a study sheet for a test coming up about the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And there were 3 questions on it about comparing Aslan to Jesus.
Yeah.
And she looks at me and says, "Mom, who's Jesus?" I thought, ooh, cultural reference lacking here.
Yeah. We've all heard it said many times, you know, if they didn't teach it, and, you know, don't indoctrinate children when they're 18 years old. Explain it to them then let them make their own decision. Fortunately, that was not true with us.
I had several atheists on the board who told me I was doing them a disservice by not educating them.
I can see that.
Now, I don't mean indoctrinating them or making them, but educating them. And I said, well, yeah, you have a point, but you know, I don't know that much about it myself. So
there is a question of psychological vulnerability. If you haven't met an idea before, it can really throw your head over heels.
Yeah.
Whatever that idea is. And if you haven't confronted difficult ethical questions early in your life, then you're going to be thrown for a sixer when you are. Can I ask you a question here, getting back to your being a bookshop owner and to getting back to reading books? First of all, what would be your very most favourite book of all time, or books?
Oh, wow.
And I'll get back onto the question I wanted to ask in a moment. There's a lead in there.
That's a hard question. It really depends on what day you ask me. Probably, if I had to pick a book or a series of books, it's not, wow. Probably Herbert's Dune series, which is very religious, ironically, but
yes.
but not in a real sense, you know.
Yes,
but it's like poetry, you know.
Yes.
But that, except for maybe the last 2, I didn't care for them. But if I had to pick, that would probably be it.
Good. The reason why I ask is because you made a very interesting remark concerning the Hunger Games. And if you don't mind me saying so, how sick you were of hearing about them. You look like you're talking about the way people get lost in symbolism without attaching it to any genuine reality. So when you see the Hunger Games, it confronts hard ethical questions, but for an audience who are not used to thinking about hard ethical questions, so they misapply the story to their own lives when it has nothing to do with that. It's set in a very future USA, which is broken down because of climate change and dictatorialism, and then they apply it to their own lives, which have nothing to do with that. So they're twisting a hard ethical question into a very narcissistic symbol. How do you feel about that? How do you think about that all?
It's probably a bit more basic for me, and this will sound very arrogant. When you have, I won't say the majority of the population, when you have a large group of people that couldn't really have an intelligent discussion of anything of real importance, but yet are so on fire for something like that. I've not read it, okay? I don't begrudge anybody who does. But at the same time, it is what it is. You know, it's kind of hard to respect a person's opinion, especially when you see the same people over and over and over. And I mean, does that make any sense? I'm not sure. You know, for example, one of my other favorite books is *The Giver* by Lois Lowry, which is probably even younger children's book than that. But it's one of my probably top 5. So it's not about the per se. It's a children's book. It's the mentality. It's the laziness. That's the word I'm looking for. It's an intellectual laziness because you know, if we have to read anything with big hard words, it can't keep my attention, and I think that's appalling. Which goes back to the education in this country, but I know that sounds arrogant, and I don't mean it to.
If you could change one thing, one practical thing, and try to make it fairly small, you know, not big, we're not looking for world peace. If you could change one thing, what would you change? How would you go about it? What would you like help with in changing?
We could dial down the stupidity.
How?
We've become this is not a small thing, we've become this society of infotainment. The news, forget your political ideology or religious, that's all irrelevant. News in general in this country, all media really, is entertainment. It's not factual. I've gotten to the point almost where I read next to none at all, because you can read the same article 5 different newspapers, watch the same story being broadcast on the television 5 different channels, you'll get 5 different why it happened. You know, but to answer your question, I wish so probably all it'll ever be is a wish that people weren't so gullible. I don't care if you agree with me. I tell my wife all the time, I want on my tombstone, I may not have all the answers, but I know if an idiot when I hear one. You know, especially if A, B, and C to get you to D was false, and the fact that people can't see that that was false. Now, I'm not talking about opinions or theology. I'm talking about real life and reality, and it's so frustrating to me. Whether it's a big issue that we're talking about or a small, I know with my work, I talk to people and the entire premise in the beginning is broken. So everything that comes after that is so frustrating. And it's not that I'm a genius or anything like that. It's not what I'm saying. It's just a little common sense could go a lot further.
While I was waiting for you to get off the phone, I heard you explain the same thing about 6 times.
Yeah. And nobody listens. I mean, you ask someone a question, or I'm sorry, they ask you a question, and before you've even opened your mouth, they've moved on. And I think that's a lack of discipline mentally. And it's, when you deal with the public day in and day out, it's very frustrating.
So if you've now been talking a little bit with the atheists on FRDB, on the FRDB bulletin board, if you had one message for them all, or for many of them, what would it be?
Wow. That's a hard question. I don't believe that I'm qualified to ask or state anything that hasn't already been stated.
You're a human being in society. Society needs your input, and you need society.
Honestly, I guess to borrow a religious term, keep the faith.
Or lack thereof.
Or lack.
You know, reason. I mean,
both.
What do we have? I mean, we're glorified primates as it is.
Yes.
If you subtract reason from the equation, we're beating each other to death with dry bones in the jungle somewhere. And the fact that more people don't appreciate that, I know it's frustrating for me, and I'm sure it's frustrating for all atheists. And like I said, just keep the faith. Ironically. But
No, it's a good term. It's a good usage. I think everybody knows what it means. Okay, stop that for now.